When I was 25, I was working at an investment bank. Very stressful environment, a lot of responsibility, good money, but I was very unhappy. I didn't mind the stress, but I would leave the office every day feeling very empty in my chest. I just was like, something's not right. And I had this underlying dream of living on the other side of the world to live in Argentina, which I would keep bringing up. And somehow that got buried underneath as I got into this corporate job. And I had a best friend at the time who I kept telling this dream. And one day he said to me, Anish, you're never going to do this. It's called a reset trigger. It's when someone triggers you something as a message to yourself that there's a truth you're not acknowledging. And he was right. I wasn't acknowledging that this is what I wanted, and I didn't do it. That very night, I booked a one-way ticket, quit my job, gave my notice, and I said, okay, one-way ticket to Buenos Aires.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about reset points. I'm delighted to welcome Anish Patel. Anish is an entrepreneur, coach, and the author of Reset Point. You can reach Anish at his website, anishcpatel.com, and I'll include that link in the show notes. Welcome, Anish. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Oh, thanks, Linda. That was a really, really great intro.
I had a wonderful time checking out your website, and I very much enjoyed seeing this timeline of reset points through your life. So, if it's okay, I would like to go through some of those reset points, and you can explain what happened and
Yeah,
what you
sure.
learned from it. And then, if we can take it one step further, and what can our listeners learn from it? What can someone else learn? So, the
Perfect.
first one was a one-way ticket to the unknown.
Okay. So this happened when I was 25. I'm 42, just for you guys to know. And when I was 25, or just before that, 4 years before that, I was working at an investment bank. Very stressful environment. I was a team leader of three, a lot of responsibility, good money, but I was very unhappy. I didn't mind the stress, but I would leave the office every day feeling very empty in my chest. I just was like, something's not right. And I had this underlying dream of living on the other side of the world to live in Argentina, which I would keep bringing up. I told my then ex, who I was dating at the time, she loved me to bits, but I even told her. And somehow that got buried underneath as I got into this corporate job. You have these dreams and then you get settled in the job and you get very comfortable and you get very settled and then you slowly push that away, down, down, down. You get more and more comfortable. And I had a best friend at the time who I kept telling this dream. And one day he said to me, Anish, you're full of shit. You're never going to do this. And he really pissed me off, but and this is what I call my book. It's called a reset trigger. It's when someone triggers you, but you don't take it as bad on the person. You take it as something, as a message to yourself that there's a truth you're not acknowledging. And he was right. I wasn't acknowledging that this is what I wanted, and I didn't do it. And in that instant, I basically, and I call this in my book, the truth is as a magic bullet. That very night, I decided I'm going to quit my job the next morning, and I broke it off with the woman I was with. It was the best thing I did because I did her a favor. She wanted to get married. I was only 25, she was 30. I booked a one-way ticket, quit my job, gave my notice, and I said, okay, one-way ticket to Buenos Aires. So I call that in my book, burn the boats. It's like if you really want to do something, you've just got to basically do it and really just do it. I know a lot of self-development causes taking massive action or whatever, but I think you almost have to look at life like there is no way back. You've got to go all the way forward. So that was at 25 where yeah, I had a dream of what I wanted. I wanted to live on the other side of the world, and I said, all right, if I don't do this now, I'm going to regret it.
Wow. Okay. That is so amazing. And it's so normal for people to have a dream, something that they really want to do, but they keep it as a dream and don't actualize it. And so for you, the first little mini wake up call was a friend saying, you don't mean this. you don't want it bad enough to do anything about it. You are too comfortable where you are. And then you thought, dang, he's right. He's right. And then probably in your mind, you're thinking, but I want to be the person who follows through, who does the things that I want to do. And then you kind of burned your boats and you did it. So, wow. So, what happened when you got to the other side of the world with your one-way ticket? Did it turn out okay? I'm curious.
Well, it only hit me when I landed, and I was scared. I was 25. I didn't know anyone on that in Buenos Aires. I didn't know the language. I had 1 week stay in a hostel downtown, and I didn't know anything apart from that. What I'm going to be doing, nothing. And I initially went there because I was dancing tango. This is a very strange thing for a boy he's got an Indian origin, born in the UK, and suddenly telling his parents, I'm moving to the other side of the world to be a tango dancer. Um, which they thought, right, this guy gave up this career with a good pay and now only has a limited amount of savings to go be a tango dancer in a random country no one knows. So I didn't have a plan apart from that, but everything when I landed, I took a U-turn. I didn't become a tango dancer. I ended up doing something else that was complete U-turn. I set up a YouTube channel. This was the early days of YouTube, 2008. And I was like, all right, I'm going to buy a camera and I'm going to go into nightclubs and go to parties and interview people about nightlife because I thought it would be fun. So I got access to all the VIP parties, guest lists, weird parties, Buenos Aires Fashion Week. I just hustled my way into every kind of party. I just was like, okay, this will be very different from what I used to do in corporate life. And I realized later why I did it because the idea itself was a bit off key. And that idea was fun. I had a lot of fun. I was going out a lot, very little sleep, a lot of drinking, a lot of other stuff. And I basically became absolutely broke because even though it was a fun idea, in those days, YouTube didn't introduce their ad revenue at that time. So there was no real way I knew how to make money from this. So I absolutely spent all my savings and went completely broke. Not even broke. I was maxed all my credit cards to the sum of £6,000. And then I was basically in a bad place. I was nearly homeless, had shingles, uh, completely emotional rock bottom. And I took this trip to the mountains where I just said to myself, something inside me said, all right, I need to get out of this city. I need to go somewhere where I can be with myself. And I didn't even know I'm going to go Tucumán. I'm just going to go to the bus station. I'm going to close my eyes and point somewhere. And I pointed to this place I'd never heard of. And I just took a trip there and it was the right thing to do. And I spent 3 days in the mountains, absolute quietness. And I then got the resolve or the energy to say to myself, all right, I need to pull myself out of this. I need to be financially independent and I'm going to do this. I'm not going back home. I'm not going to go back home and live with my parents. That's not an option. And then at that point, I set up this video agency. And everything I learned from that other thing I did with the nightclub and filming and all that crazy stuff, I learned some skills. And I learned to work with people in that area in the creative video industry to set up my video agency. And I got the right people together. I put the team together. It was very, very tough to do that in a third world country at that time. And I surprised myself because it shot up very quickly. I started getting a lot of clients. It exploded after a year of not making any profit to very quickly in 3 years making 7 figures. And I didn't aim, I had no goal to have that much money. I wanted to just be independent financially. I was quite humble about what I wanted financially. But I loved the business. I loved the creative aspect. That was what I got into it for. As I made more money, I basically was becoming more of a businessman who wasn't really reflecting who I was. And I was pushing to try and make as much money as I could. I lost sight of why I did that business in the first place. And then in my early 30s, I went into absolute burnout. I had a girl I was married to. I married her over there. We separated. And so everything kind of collapsed. And I moved to Berlin, of all places, for a collapse. And I went into massive depression, collapsed depression, lost, didn't know who I was, what I was doing, making a lot of money, but I wasn't very happy inside. I was very miserable. And so in Berlin became an interesting experience where I was doing a lot of drugs and a lot of alcohol because Berlin is the rave capital of the world. It's, if you don't know that, I'm sure a lot of your viewers do. It's a very big dark hole of techno music. So at 30 years old, I went heavily into drugs, alcohol, and sex and everything in that kind of, drugs, sex, rock and roll, deep. I just went right into it because I just said, okay, this is something I just wanting to do, even though it's a pretty much a nasty addiction. And I also explored art, a lot of writing poetry and a lot of things. And then I came to the realization, I was like, well, like, I've realized that I'm not actually connected to my body. I'm very numbed out in my body. And after 2 years of this drinking and alcohol and all this other stuff, I basically, again, took some space. I locked myself in my penthouse apartment, decided to lie on the floor, and I said, okay, I'm going to sit here till I feel anything in my body. Because I was like, I don't feel emotions. I struggled a lot with connecting with people. People talk about emotions. I didn't know what they were. I couldn't feel them. So I lied on the floor of my apartment for 10 days straight, for hours on end, till I could feel anything. So it was a lot of time watching my mind cycle through, telling me, get up, this is stupid. What are you doing? Go do something else, go watch TV, have a sandwich. And then after about 5, 6 hours of just lying there, I started feeling crack in my chest. I could feel something happening, sensation in my chest. 30 minutes later, all this grief started coming up. Tears were streaming down my eyes. I started wailing, crying out for my mother in particular. And this went on for hours. And then the next few days, I started feeling deep melancholy. I just sat with myself for a long time, just feeling into what was happening inside me. And then about a few days later, something interesting happened. I woke up and I started seeing the sun come through the window, and I could feel it. Not, I mean, I could actually feel it in my body. I was like, oh, I can feel this light come through. And I went outside and everything was absolutely bright. And I couldn't help having a smile on my face. I thought I was almost reborn. And that was the first kind of entry point, or you might want to call it emotional or spiritual awakening, which I was like, okay, I've really opened up here something. And I met my first, not my first actually, my other girlfriend after that. And I'm sorry, I'm mindful of time because I feel like I'm talking a lot here. So yeah, I'm just like leaving you to judge what time it is. I had another interesting experience where I met my then girlfriend, because 6 months before that we met, I couldn't connect with her, and we met in a bar, and I thought she was amazing. I thought she was absolutely gorgeous, but I couldn't connect with her. I was kind of struggling with that. She thought I was very strange. After this experience, it was interesting because I saw her randomly then across the window of a bar, and we just came together, like we ran towards each other. It was almost like something had opened up, and it was magical. And I bring this up because in my book, I talk about this as another reset, which is getting into your body is the key. Getting into your body and getting open in your body, opening yourself up to love and opening yourself up to, people call this abundance, but opening yourself up to what's true inside you opens the doorway outside. There's a lot of things people are chasing outside, a lot of validation, a lot of success. And that was the first instance where I realized, oh, it's actually inside me. This is all actually all happening inside. But it was the start of the journey because what I also realized was that I had a lot of problems. So I was like, even though I'm open, this is great. Oh wow, I've got all these traumas, I've got all this pain that I haven't been acknowledging. And so the next 7 years, I deeply explored that. I trained as an actor. I started investing in personal development, spirituality. I did a lot of workshops, worked with some very famous gurus on the planet, and was just seeking. I was a seeker. I don't know, you probably know that word. I was seeking answers because I knew it was inside, but I still needed, like, I don't know, you call it a toolkit or whatever. How do I get inside? And during pandemic, I started working with this group, a personal development group, and I went quite deep into a concept called embodiment. Embodiment is about getting inside your body, dropping into your body, similar to what happened in Berlin, going very deep to find your true fulfillment because everything that you need is here already inside you. Worked with that group just before pandemic. Pandemic, I went quite deep into this work, uncovered some very serious sexual traumas, which was pretty much one of the roots of a lot of my problems. Went through that, and then I went through a massive crash. 2021 was a huge crash. I went through some kind of intense crash where I had to get away from that group because there were some things which I didn't feel were very honest what they were doing. There was a lot of how do I describe this? A lot of the work they were doing wasn't so clean and pure. And I stress this in my book. It's finding a teacher and finding people to work with in this industry. You have to be very discerning because there's a lot of people who are half realized in this work. And you need someone who's very clean and honest, that's not abusing its students. It's not trying to abuse them and take control for money, financial gain, because that's happening a lot now in the industry. That was a wake-up call for me after I had this experience. After I had that crash, something very profound happened. This was going into 2022. I started feeling a lot more peace. A lot of that heaviness I've experienced most of my life since childhood had lifted. And I just felt a lot more, this is a very difficult thing to describe, but I'd call it presence. But it's this kind of connection with everything, life, the deep, subtle energy of life that's everywhere. Now, that might sound very woo to people listening to this because it's like people are like, what the hell is that? That sounds weird. But it's almost like connecting with the energy that's present in everything and everything. I call this life force. And in a lot of modalities, it's called chi. In Hinduism, it's called prana. These are things I knew very intellectually in my head, but I never felt them deeply like I do now. And then I realized that, oh, this is the key to everything. Being with this is the actual key to all our problems. But the problem was that I was so deeply in my conditioning or my traumas or my pain that I couldn't see it. I couldn't feel it till this point. So my book, Reset Point, talks about this because throughout my life, all these resets, which I just talked about, Argentina, Berlin, going through all this self-development journey, the whole point of it was actually being present, but actually connecting with this deep life force. Because all those trips I took into the mountains, when I went to Berlin, when I lied on the floor, I was being guided by something to do that. Something intelligent inside of me was guiding me. I wasn't reading it in a book. I wasn't reading it. No one told me to do it. I intuitively knew it. So I think all throughout my life, I was being guided without me even knowing it. And so what my book talks about is actually trusting that deep inside yourself to guide you. Because even I can't tell you what to do. You know what you need to do. It's all inside. And so the book actually helps you to uncover that and go into that and trust that. Um, Not to trust the formula, but to trust what's coming up under all the conditioning.
Isn't that fantastic? That the answers are inside of you. They weren't even in Argentina. They weren't in a mountain. They weren't in Berlin. They were in you. I love as you're sharing your story how it was so personally tailored for you. What would speak to you? What would awaken you? Your journey is what worked for you. And it wasn't a point where we're going in a straight line and we're heading in the same direction. It was over here and over here and over here. And even though you mentioned from the beginning, from that first leap of faith, you might call it, where you went down to Argentina, it was, you know, I'm a little off here. What I'm planning here isn't quite working. And yet, the skill set that you obtained as you were following that direction was just the right thing for the next step. And as you worked your way through, I also found it quite fascinating the idea that we are searching for something. And you mentioned specifically, I couldn't feel anything. And we always look to the outside so that I can feel something. I want to feel successful. I want to feel happy. I want to feel loved. I want to feel fulfilled. I want to feel something. And we assume that it's out there. When I get enough money, everything is going to be all better. When I get, this next high, when I get this next girl, when I have this next encounter, when I have this whatever, it's going to fix what is inside of me. But the truth is, when the problem is inside, that's where the solution is too. And as we are able to be brave enough to face that inside and allow ourselves to feel, it is so common, Anish, to numb. We have, I think, a worldwide addiction to numbing. I don't want to feel pain. I don't want to feel discomfort. I don't want to feel misery. And if any of those things come up, I don't want to feel lonely. So I'm going to pull out my phone and I'm going to start scrolling. Because as soon as I start scrolling, I don't have to feel lonely. I don't have to feel alone. I don't have to feel whatever. Or, and layers and layers. There are addictions of all kinds. We can be addicted to food. We can be addicted to alcohol. We can be addicted to drugs. We can be addicted to sex. All of these things are coping skills to help us numb so that we can't feel. But the healing will not come until we allow it. And that takes courage. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes a long time. So now that you've gone through your journey and it's not a straight line, you're more like a pinball machine, man. You're here, 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 and everywhere. But now you're in a place where you're ready to help other people, even where it's not just about me anymore. It's about, wow, this is really cool. Let me share it with you. So, how do you help other people so that they can listen to their intuition and be able to trust it to move forward in their pinball of experience?
So I had a teacher, the last one I had, and I'll repeat what he said because it is pretty much the answer is pointing them back to themselves. So I do have exercises, obviously, of doing that, but everything that does is employing that mechanism of pointing them back to themselves. And I guess where the real beauty of the work lies is having a helping hand to help them do it. Because I think the biggest struggle for people to do this work is I'm alone. We're so disconnected from each other now because of technology. When you suffer from pain and trauma and all sorts of things, you feel like you're the only one dealing with it. And I mean, there's a lot of reference and information and content out there, people saying about this, this, and this, but I think being with someone in a group in a personal experience is very, very powerful. Being in a group of people and connecting and being able to share that honestly is actually very, very powerful. I think even, for example, 12-step groups are very powerful in that nature because it's just about being with a group of similar people who are alcoholics. And saying, I'm an alcoholic, you're an alcoholic, we both share the struggle and we're okay with it. We're okay having this problem.
I'm so glad you brought that up. And isn't that really why we're having this conversation today? So that people can recognize I'm not alone. My journey hasn't been smooth. I'm struggling. I I don't want to feel, and then I can't feel, and then I'm stuck. All of these things we share openly and even without apology. It's like this happened and it's going to be okay. And I think that's really an important message. You're not alone and it's going to be okay. But not every journey and not every trajectory is going to bring us to that place of fulfillment and of peace and enjoyment um, and connection. There are certain pathways that lead to good things, and there are certain pathways that lead to misery.
Mhm.
And sometimes we have to go to misery before we're ready to go for good things. But I do want to emphasize that not every pathway leads to joy. We can take some shortcuts. We don't have to hit rock bottom in order
Mhm.
to find joy. You can, if that's the path that you want to take, that one works, but it's not necessary. So we're here to say, hey, there's a shortcut. If you want to be happy sooner, we can help you.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of what I call reset points or resets is that those are almost like they almost are like emotional bonds. They become painful because people are resisting it. So you're right. It can be easy if we embrace it. If there's someone who's been working a corporate job for 20 years and they're miserable and that's not aligned to who they are, and suddenly their whole life collapses, like their wife leaves them, they get fired, and then the amount of pain that person will experience is going to be immense because he's been fighting change for all his life. Whereas someone who basically knows, okay, well, I'm not very happy here. This is not fulfilling me. I got to get out of this. Or I need to accept that there's some pain here that I'm not acknowledging. That can be easier once you just take the time to acknowledge it.
We're fighting it. We're making things harder. And however many pings on your pinball game it takes to get to the point of it's in here and I am ready to look at it, then that's fine. I mean, hard or easy, the answer is still right here.
Yeah.
Travel the world. It's you took yourself with you. You took the answer with you everywhere you went.
Yeah, and I think yeah, my editor was saying the thing. He was saying the same thing as you, pinball. Like I was completely like because my whole thing was about adventure then. That was my whole I was an explorer. But then my exploration turned inward because I was like enjoying the out. That's the hero's journey, isn't it? They're going on the adventure outside, and then they come back and they're like, oh, it's all here inside me all along. And then they come back home and they have the wisdom, and then they share that with the next generation. And because I'm not that same person, that kid that was 25 years old who wanted to travel the world. I actually, I still like traveling, but I'm not like before. I'm like quite happy to be at home with my dog and near the ocean. For me, it's an absolute pleasure. And it's very simple and it's very basic. For someone who might be like, oh, this is how I live, they might be like, well, that's incredibly boring. But it's because I feel things, the depth of peace and fulfillment I feel inside. For me, that's everything. So it does come back to the depth of feeling and the depth of fulfillment inside you, which actually is the true answer. Then yeah, going around everywhere trying to find excitement. But it's natural when you're young.
There's
So
nothing wrong with your story, and the way that you did it was perfect for you. Again, we can tell our story without apology, And that quest for adventure is lovely. And hopefully you were able to satisfy that. And then it's even more beautiful to find that deeper satisfaction inside, where you can find pleasure in travel and in simple things. And when you can find pleasure in simple things, man, you can have a lot of joy because there's a lot of opportunities for simple pleasures.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't have that as much as before, but now it's obviously the most smallest moment can be the biggest thing.
Isn't that beautiful?
Mm.
Lovely. Well, Anish, this has been a delightful journey. Is there anything that you want to make sure that we cover before we close?
Well, I mentioned my book, but it's on Amazon. It's called Reset Point. It talks about this journey a bit more in depth. Sometimes it's easier reading it than listening to it. And then as you mentioned, my website, come have a look, see if it resonates. Maybe it's entertaining for some people, but I'd love to hear
Yeah.
from them, and I hope I added value to your listeners.
Well, thank you so much for visiting with me today. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much.
In closing, I'd like to share a quote by Julia Quinn. She said, "In every life, there is a turning point, a moment so tremendous, so sharp and clear, that one feels as if one's been hit in the chest, all the breath knocked out, and one knows, absolutely knows, without the merest hint of a shadow of a doubt, that one's life will never be the same." Today, I invite our listeners to allow our reset points to lead us to a better life. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for listening. Please share and subscribe to help us reach new listeners. And if you'd like to heal your life from the inside out, there is a free video series at hopeforhealingfoundation.org. Just click on the free stuff tab. I also invite you to grab a copy of one of my books, like Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. See you next time on Linda's Corner.